You felt it, didn't you? That moment when someone looked through you as if you were glass. That instant when your words were interrupted, dismissed, treated as background noise in a conversation you thought you were part of. Perhaps it was the casual disrespect, the public undermining, the subtle mockery disguised as humor. Or maybe it was the profound betrayal, the knife that came from someone you trusted, someone you elevated, someone who owed you their position. You felt the heat rise in your chest, the tightness in your jaw, the primitive urge to respond, to defend, to strike back immediately and make them understand they cannot treat you this way. And in that moment, you stood at a crossroads that has existed since the first human social structures emerged from the chaos of nature. Two paths diverged before you, and the one you chose revealed everything about your understanding of power, your mastery of human psychology, your position in the eternal hierarchy that governs all human interaction. Law 1. The first path is walked by the majority. It is the path of the emotional, the reactive, the ultimately powerless. These are the people who mistake their feelings for reality, who believe that the intensity of their emotional response grants them some form of authority or righteousness. They are the ones who respond to disrespect with immediate confrontation, with raised voices, with public displays of wounded pride. They make their pain visible. They seek validation from witnesses. They demand apologies, explanations, acknowledgement of the wrong done to them. They operate from a position they perceive as strength but is, in truth, the most transparent form of weakness. Watch them closely, these emotional reactors, these slaves to their own nervous systems. When disrespected, they cannot help but show you exactly where it hurts. Their faces flush. Their voices crack. Their hands tremble. They pursue the person who wronged them, seeking closure, seeking vindication, seeking that moment when the other person admits fault and restores their damaged ego. They send the angry text message immediately. They make the phone call while still heated. They confront publicly because they need witnesses to validate their feelings. They cannot sleep until they have responded, until they have made their position clear, until they have defended their honor in the court of public opinion. These people believe they are standing up for themselves. They think their immediate response demonstrates strength, self-respect, boundaries. They have confused reaction with power. They have mistaken emotional incontinence for authenticity. They do not understand that every time they react predictably to provocation, they hand their enemies a weapon. They become controllable, manipulable. Their patterns of response become the very chains by which others lead them. The weak man wears his ego on his sleeve, and it bleeds at the slightest touch. He needs constant affirmation from his environment because he has no internal foundation. His sense of self is so fragile, so dependent on external validation, that any challenge to it constitutes an existential crisis. Disrespect, to him, is not merely an inconvenience or a tactical move by an adversary. It is an attack on his very being, and he must defend against it immediately, reflexively, without calculation or strategy. But there is a second path. It is walked by far fewer people because it requires something most humans cannot access: the complete separation of ego from strategy. This is the path of power, and it was mapped most clearly by a Florentine diplomat who watched the bloody theater of Renaissance Italian politics and understood what separated the enduring from the extinct. Law 2. Niccolo Machiavelli did not write The Prince as philosophy. He wrote it as observation, as pattern recognition from the raw data of power dynamics playing out in one of history's most brutal political environments. He watched princes rise and fall. He watched republics flourish and collapse. He watched men of virtue die in poverty while men of calculated ruthlessness built dynasties. And he understood something fundamental about human nature that most people spend their entire lives refusing to accept. Power is not a reward for goodness. It is not granted to those who deserve it. It flows to those who understand its mechanisms and are willing to operate within reality rather than within their preferred moral fantasy. When Machiavelli observed power, he noticed that the powerful did not react like the powerless. They did not respond to insults with visible anger. They did not seek immediate confrontation when challenged. They did not make their pain public. Instead, They did something that appeared, to the emotional majority, as weakness or cowardice. They went silent. They withdrew. They observed. And in that silence, in that apparent passivity, they were doing something the reactive person cannot comprehend. They were thinking. You see, when you are disrespected, you are not experiencing a personal attack. You are experiencing a test. The universe, through the medium of another human being, is asking you a question. Do you understand power, or do you merely understand emotion? Can you separate your wounded feelings from strategic calculation, or are you still operating at the level of a child who cries when hurt? The powerful understand that disrespect is information. It tells you how someone perceives you. It reveals their strategy, their weaknesses, their fears. When someone disrespects you publicly, they are showing you their hand. They are telling you they see you as beneath them, as someone who can be challenged without consequence, as someone whose response is predictable and manageable. They are making a calculation, and in that calculation, they have assigned you a value. The question is not whether you accept that value. The question is whether you understand that their perception is now a weapon you can use against them. Consider what happens in the mind of the Machiavellian when disrespect occurs. There is a moment, a fraction of a second, when the same primitive emotional response tries to activate. The amygdala fires. The body prepares for confrontation. But then something else happens, something that has been trained through discipline and understanding. The prefrontal cortex engages. Rational analysis overrides emotional reaction. And the powerful person asks different questions than the weak person asks. The weak person asks, how dare they? What gives them the right? How can I make them understand they cannot treat me this way? The powerful person asks, why now? What do they gain from this? Who is watching? What does their choice to disrespect me reveal about their position, their desperation, their strategy? How can I use this moment to advance my position while weakening theirs? You see the difference? One set of questions centers the ego. The other centers strategy. One set of questions seeks emotional satisfaction. The other seeks tactical advantage. Law 3. Silence, in the moment of disrespect, is not weakness. It is the most profound form of dominance. When you remain silent in response to provocation, you do something that destabilizes your opponent. You refuse to play your assigned role in their script. They have provoked you expecting a reaction that will justify their next move, that will make you look emotional or unstable or aggressive. Your silence denies them this. It creates uncertainty. It makes them wonder if they miscalculated. It forces them to continue acting without knowing the consequences of their action, and in that uncertainty, they make mistakes. The silent response communicates something far more threatening than words ever could. It says, I heard you. I registered your move. And I am deciding whether you are worth responding to at all. It inverts the power dynamic. Suddenly, the person who disrespected you is waiting for your reaction. They are in suspense. They are, whether they realize it or not, seeking your validation of their action through your response. And you give them nothing. You become unreadable, unpredictable, dangerous. Machiavelli understood that the appearance of indifference is more powerful than the reality of anger. The prince who shows no reaction to insult is more feared than the prince who retaliates immediately, because the silent prince suggests depths of calculation that the reactive prince does not possess. The question becomes not if there will be consequences, but when, and in what form and from what angle. This is where most people fail to understand the true nature of power. They believe power is loud. They think it announces itself. They imagine the powerful person as someone who dominates every conversation, who makes dramatic gestures, who ensures everyone knows their position at all times. This is the performance of power by those who do not possess it. True power whispers. True power waits. True power understands that the most devastating move is the one your opponent does not see coming because they have already dismissed you, underestimated you, convinced themselves that your silence meant acceptance or weakness. The psychology here is ancient and unchanging. Humans are pattern recognition machines. We assess threat levels based on observable behavior. The person who reacts immediately and emotionally appears volatile, yes, but also readable, predictable, manageable. Their patterns can be learned and exploited. But the person who shows no reaction, who remains composed while clearly having registered the offense, triggers a different kind of assessment. This person suggests control, discipline, hidden capacity. The unknown is always more threatening than the known, and by refusing to reveal your response pattern, you transform yourself from a known quantity into an unknown threat. Law 4. Consider the mechanism of fear versus love that Machiavelli analyzed so coldly. He noted that it is better to be feared than loved if one cannot be both, because fear is more reliable. Love depends on the goodness of others. Fear depends only on the certainty of consequence. When you react emotionally to disrespect, you inspire neither fear nor love. You inspire contempt. The person who made you react now knows they can control you through your emotions. They can make you angry whenever they wish. They can disrupt your composure at will. You have become their puppet, dancing on the strings of your own nervous system. But when you respond with strategic silence, when you absorb the disrespect and show nothing, you plant a seed of fear. Not the immediate fear of confrontation, but the deeper fear of unknown consequences. The person who disrespected you now carries uncertainty. Did they miscalculate? Is there a response coming they cannot predict? Have they made an enemy who thinks before acting? This uncertainty is corrosive. It affects their sleep. It makes them second guess. It creates the psychological space in which you can operate while they remain off balance. Law 5. There is a mathematics to social power that most people never learn. Your value in any social or professional hierarchy is not determined by your titles, your achievements, or your character. It is determined by perception, by reputation, by the collective assessment of your capacity to affect outcomes. And reputation is built not through your successes but through the stories others tell about you when you are not present. When you react emotionally to disrespect, the story that circulates is simple. You are someone who can be provoked. Someone emotional. Someone whose composure is fragile. Someone who needs to defend themselves immediately because they doubt their own position. This story diminishes you regardless of whether your emotional reaction was justified or righteous. But when you remain silent, when you appear unaffected, when you continue operating as if the disrespect was beneath your notice, a different story emerges. You are someone who operates on a different level. Someone who is not playing the same game as others. Someone who sees challenges that would devastate others as minor inconveniences not worth acknowledging. Someone who clearly has resources or plans or perspectives that allow them to absorb what would destroy someone of lesser capacity. Do you see how perception creates reality in human social systems? The powerful person and the powerless person might have identical resources, identical intelligence, identical networks. But the powerful person has trained others to perceive them as formidable through careful management of their responses and their image. The powerless person has trained others to perceive them as reactive and emotional through their inability to control their responses. Machiavelli would tell you that the wise prince studies human nature not as it should be but as it is. And human nature is this. We respect what we fear we cannot fully understand or control. We dismiss what we have figured out, what we can predict, what responds to our provocations in ways we expected. Your goal, if you seek power rather than emotional satisfaction, is to be the former, never the latter. Law 6. The timing of response is everything. The weak person responds immediately because they cannot bear the discomfort of unresolved conflict. The powerful person waits because they understand that vengeance is a dish best served cold, that retaliation is most effective when it is unexpected, when the person who wronged you has moved on and forgotten, when they are vulnerable in ways they were not during the initial confrontation. There is profound psychological violence in the delayed response. When you wait days, weeks, months to address a wrong, you communicate something terrifying. You do not forget. You do not forgive without conscious decision. You keep accounts. You have the discipline to separate emotional impulse from strategic action. and when you finally respond, you do so at a time and in a manner that maximizes damage while minimizing your exposure. This is not about revenge in the emotional sense. It is about correction, about education, about ensuring that the person who disrespected you, and more importantly, everyone who witnessed it, understands that there are consequences to challenging you. But these consequences come in forms and at times that cannot be easily connected back to the initial offense. You do not announce your retaliation. You simply allow circumstances to unfold that happen to be very unfortunate for the person who wronged you. The art here is deniability. The weak person retaliates obviously and claims credit for it because they need the emotional satisfaction of the other person knowing they have been paid back. The powerful person retaliates in ways that appear as natural consequences, bad luck, the inevitable result of the other person's own choices. When someone disrespects you publicly and weeks later finds themselves excluded from important decisions, passed over for opportunities, quietly isolated from networks they relied upon, they may suspect your involvement. But they cannot prove it. They cannot point to a clear action. And their attempts to claim you are behind their misfortune make them appear paranoid and further diminish their credibility. This is the application of Machiavellian principle to modern social dynamics. The methods change with technology and culture, but the underlying psychology remains constant. Power flows to those who understand that social reality is constructed through perception, that perception is shaped by carefully managed narratives, and that narratives are controlled by those who act deliberately rather than reactively. Law 7. You must understand the profound truth that most people reject. Other humans are not rational actors motivated by justice or fairness. They are animals operating sophisticated social instincts, constantly assessing dominance and submission, constantly calibrating their behavior based on perceived costs and benefits. When you react emotionally to disrespect, you signal that you operate at the emotional animal level. When you respond strategically, you signal that you operate at a higher level of consciousness, one that has transcended the immediate emotional impulse in favor of longer-term calculation. The darkness here is not in the strategy but in the reality the strategy reflects. Most people want to believe in a world where good people finish first, where justice prevails, where treating others with respect and dignity earns respect and dignity in return. This is a beautiful fiction. It is the world we wish we inhabited. But it is not the world we actually inhabit. The world we actually inhabit is one where power dynamics determine outcomes, where perception shapes reality, where those who understand human psychology at its most cynical level consistently outmaneuver those who insist on operating according to how they wish humans behaved rather than how humans actually behave. You can reject this reality. You can insist on being the good person who refuses to play these games. And you will be very moral and very righteous and very consistently outmaneuvered by people who understand what you refuse to acknowledge. Or you can accept what Machiavelli accepted, that effectiveness requires operating within reality rather than within ideology. That being able to do good at scale requires first acquiring and maintaining power. That power is not granted to the deserving but seized by the strategic. That if you want to shape outcomes, you must first learn the actual rules of the game being played, not the rules you wish were being applied. The choice before you now is the same choice that has faced every person who aspired to genuine power rather than the appearance of power. You can continue to be the person who reacts emotionally, who seeks immediate satisfaction, who needs others to acknowledge your worth. You will remain at the mercy of anyone who understands your patterns and is willing to provoke you. You will cycle through the same conflicts, the same feelings of disrespect, the same frustrated attempts to make others treat you differently. And you will never understand why some people, despite lacking your talents or your character, consistently achieve better outcomes. Or you can become someone different. Someone who sees disrespect as information. Who responds with silence and observation. Who cultivates a reputation for being unreadable and strategic. Who understands that power is not about being right but about being effective. Who separates ego from outcome. Who plays the long game while others chase immediate emotional satisfaction. This transformation requires that you kill something inside yourself. The need to be understood, validated, appreciated in the moment. You must become comfortable with being misunderstood, with being perceived as weak by people who do not matter, with absorbing disrespect without visible reaction. This is not passivity. It is the most active form of power, the deliberate construction of a self that operates according to strategy rather than impulse. The powerful do not broadcast their intentions. They do not announce their plans. They do not warn their enemies. They move in silence, and their opponents only understand what happened after it is too late to counter it. When you complain about being disrespected, you announce your wound. When you threaten retaliation, you forfeit the advantage of surprise. When you demand apologies, you reveal that you still need external validation to feel whole. Understand what is being offered to you here. This is not motivation. This is not inspiration. This is a map of how power actually functions in human social systems, stripped of the comforting lies we tell ourselves about fairness and justice and merit. It is uncomfortable precisely because it is true. Look around at the people who hold actual power in your environment. Study them carefully. You will find that they operate according to these principles, whether they learned them consciously or discovered them through experience. Machiavelli's true insight was not that humans are evil. It was that humans are predictable. We respond to incentives. We assess costs and benefits. We respect power more than virtue. We remember consequences more than intentions. And if you understand these patterns, if you can see past the social performances to the underlying mechanics, you can engineer outcomes that appear as natural results but were, in fact, carefully constructed. The 7 laws are before you now. They are not suggestions. They are descriptions of how power moves through human systems. You can reject them and insist that the world should work differently, and the world will continue operating exactly as it does while you remain confused about why your righteousness produces no results. Or you can accept them, internalize them, and begin the work of transforming yourself from someone who reacts to someone who acts. Now you face a decision, and this decision will determine your trajectory. You can close this and return to your previous patterns, to your emotional reactions, to your need for immediate vindication. Or you can declare, right now, in this moment, that you are choosing a different path. That you are committing to strategic thinking over emotional reaction. That you are studying power as it actually operates rather than as you wish it operated. If you are ready to step into this understanding, to embrace the Machiavellian perspective that has guided the powerful since before it had a name, then commit. Do not simply agree in your mind. Make it real. Declare your choice publicly. State that you are choosing strategy over emotion, long-term position over short-term satisfaction, power over validation. Make this declaration visible. Make yourself accountable to this new path. Transform yourself from someone who reacts to someone who calculates. The laws of power are waiting for those disciplined enough to apply them. They do not care about your feelings. They do not reward your good intentions. They simply exist, operating beneath the surface of every human interaction, every social hierarchy, every struggle for position and influence. Which version of yourself will you become? Make your declaration. Begin your transformation. The choice is yours, but choosing not to decide is itself a decision. Choosing to remain as you are is choosing to remain powerless. What will it be?